Well, thank you, Derrel, for joining me. And of course, you've been working now. How long have you been working in this field, Derrel? I know it's probably quite a considerable length of time, yes?
Well, I think I was there when they did build the pyramids.
Oh, 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 oh
I may
no.
have been one of the slaves that helped them. I don't know. I've been doing it for over 50 years.
Wow. I've been at this for 41 myself, and I know that, throughout that time, you've seen a lot of changes, and I assume you've been identifying certain changes, certainly over the last, say, 3 or 4 years. A lot of people at the top now in the US, in the congressional hearings and all these different things, there's a bit of a narrative change. They're not talking about ETs anymore. They're using the term NHI, non-human intelligence, and they're not talking about extraterrestrials anymore. They're talking about interdimensionals. I mean, do you think do you think that is just amount now it's come a time when the pill is getting a little bit too big to swallow, where it's just simply that these things are traveling the vast distances of space to come to planet Earth? Because Arrow, the Pentagon UFO program, did an investigation and they concluded they didn't have enough evidence to really say they're extraterrestrials in the way we think they're traveling the vast distances of space to come to planet Earth. NASA have done the same thing, and they've concluded the same thing as well in September of last year that they don't see enough evidence. They know UFOs exist, they know they're being seen, and people are having experiences, but they're not finding enough evidence to say there's enough evidence to point towards that this interstellar travel's taking place to planet Earth. There's no seemingly super highway passing backwards and forwards to Earth because considering the amount of statistics now regarding on a 24-hour basis of UFOs seen around planet Earth, we are talking tremendous amounts of UFOs. And that's the only ones that are reported. Maybe a considerable lot are not reported, of course, probably the majority. So where are they all coming from? Is the big question. And if they are tracking backwards and forwards to Earth, we'd expect to see a huge amount of superhighway traffic passing through and out of our ionosphere, which is easily to detected. Yes, we get some things out there, but not enough to constitute the phenomena that's seemingly being reported and taking place today. I just wondered what your views on this and what they're, in regarding what they're saying. They're thinking it's interdimensional phenomena we're dealing with.
Well, I think the I have to go back to my own experiences. I kept most of them private for till the late 80s because I didn't I wasn't reading about people having uh, other experiences other than the George Adamski type thing. Here, drink this liquid. We're here to help you save the planet, fix your ozone hole, and all that. None of which has happened yet, and I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah.
Nice aspect. But my experiences weren't like that at all. But the non-human intelligence, that, in
Yes.
my opinion, the seven basically flavors of alien that we're seeing, the little gray, the taller gray, the Nordic, the reptile, the mantis, and all that, a number of them which I've seen personally and had some horrific experiences with. And the NHIs, in my opinion, control and made, hatched, cloned, and manufactured the seven ones that we're looking at. Because if you look at the DNA of each one of them, even just a cursory look, the DNA comes from here. I mean, you don't go to
Yes.
Saturn to get a praying mantis DNA. We got several hundred species right here on this
Yes.
planet. We are the cosmic Walmart, the blue light special. If you need it, we got it.
We
And
have.
I think that's what they did, and that's what we're looking at.
It does seem even way that's the way, even when it comes to a lot of analysis. It's been put forward. Now, initially, I don't know if there was a bit of a ruse. I mean, we were told UFO metamaterial might have an isotopic differential, and which would indicate that it was non-terrestrial in origin. However, when reports got released, the reports suggested that the materials, though unusual, could be found on planet Earth, including some forms of high purity aluminium. Now, aluminium is abundance on Earth, but not in high purity. It'd have to be industrialized, but it could be done. But they don't seem to be pushing out information to say this is an actual extraterrestrial stuff. It doesn't exist on planet Earth. All the main information that they're putting out suggests that they are materials that could be manufactured from earthly origin, industrialized to manufacture. I'm not seeing any extraterrestrial evidence. Also, when it comes to the alien implant phenomena, because it was rumored at some point that we might be looking at maybe isotopic differentials there, things that show that it to be of extraterrestrial. Do we have enough information regarding the analysis of these alien implants to say these are materials that are not found on planet Earth? Or could they all be found on planet Earth, but maybe you have to be industrialized or manufactured?
Well, the answer to the question is we don't have uh, the smoking gun, in my opinion. Uh, the surgeries well,
Hmm.
how I discovered the implant phenomenon is 1960. When I was 12 years old, I was the recipient of an alien implant and was wide awake when it happened. And so I remember the event very clearly. And then later had testing done to see what in the world was done, if that was imaginary or whatever. And the testing showed to be that it's something that was clearly done there. But the fact is that bring the audience up to date on this. The next time that this got exploited was in 1992. I did a presentation for John Muir Medical Hospital, a paid presentation for continuing education for 250 surgeons and doctors on medical complications of alleged human alien implant.
Mm.
I did not at that time make, and that was recorded, I did not make any statements that the implants, in fact, of what we were looking at there on X-rays were. I said, if they're alien, will there? I said, you doctors, I said, you live in a different world. You live with Bayesian logic and this sort of thing. And I said,
Yeah.
so what I'm going to give you is information to destroy my argument if I'm wrong.
Mm.
And we do the first set of surgeries, which we did that coming year, next year. I said, if these objects are alien in origin, there'll be no chronic or acute inflammatory cells around the object. I said, now most of you are going to say that ain't going to happen. So that's good. That you got me. If it doesn't happen on first surgery, then I'm done. Second, their nerve cells will be present that are inappropriate for the affected area. Again, not going to happen. Objects will be absent of discernible technology if they are alien. They're alien inspired, this sort of thing. Even if they use our tech, our biology, it's going to be noticeably different.
Mm.
The fourth thing would be metallic. If the metallic, plastic, and ceramic styled implants that we currently see on these X-rays you're looking at are passe, in my opinion. They're 15 to 50 years old and out of date. The
Okay.
technology they're going to be using is different.
Mm.
If it's human in origin, I said it'll be readily discernible as human and possibly human tech. I think that's going to be clear. Eventually, there will be biological implants that will be far different than anything we're imagining, and that will be central nervous system cells present in the wrong areas. In other words, brain cells in the wrong part of your body.
Yes.
And the seventh thing I told them, I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to know, is is eventually apps will be used in app styled implants will be used instead of biological ones. And these
Right.
alien apps are many programs that will be running without your knowledge. Some will control behavior, others thought, spyware, and even malware. I said that's my opinion. I said, prove me wrong on the first surgery. When we did the first surgery, two doctors were standing there and said, how in God's name could you possibly know what the
Mm.
pathologist is telling us? No, he looked at first of all, he looked at the cells and he said, well, I just looking at them and said, well, those are chronic or acute inflammatory cells around any foreign body. I said, I know you're absolutely right because doctors are. I said, but since I'm not a doctor and I don't have a clue, would you check them just to be sure? He put them under microscope and says, well, what in the world? There are no inflammatory cells present, either chronic or acute. Why? This is keratin. What would keratin be doing around those metal objects? Keratin is only on the outside of the body. It's hair, surface skin, And your fingernails. He said, I said, well, those were found deep inside the body. He said, no, they weren't. There's no such thing as keratin being deep inside the body. And we had a nice discussion, but he was quite angry about that that statement.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what to me, that's what I want to hear. Impossible, can't be, never happened. I said, well, we got it on film in front of 17 witnesses and 2 doctors,
yeah.
and I did the hypnotic anesthesia. So we're pretty comfortable. He said, I don't care if God was present. I'm telling you, it didn't happen.
So is he saying then that the keratin is been placed around the objects, which is like from the individual themselves, skin or those sort of things, to disguise itself in the body so that your body
Absolutely.
does not react to it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And we suspected that in my case, I wondered, well, where in the world would they get that? And I remembered when I was the next night after my first abduction event, they came back the second time, which I had no clue what any of this stuff was at age 4 years old. I had no clue. 1952. And I never told my parents. In fact, my mother passed away here recently, and before she died, she said,
Oh,
well, I
sorry.
saw you on TV, and they said you're an abductee. No, that's not true. You're an investigator. I said,
Yeah.
actually, Mom, that's the true story. Well,
Yeah.
why did you never tell us? That's because I didn't want to see that dumb looking Boo Radley look on your face like I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
I said, I just couldn't deal with it at age 4. I
Yeah. I
can now.
understand. Yeah. Yeah. Is any of the research been provided in regarding what these implants are actually made of? Are they, I mean, am I right by saying from the research that I've looked at that they do vary? Some are seeming to be biological, some seem to be meteorological, some seeming metallurgy of some sort. There's a variation in these things. Am I right by saying that, Derrel? There's a variation of these things, they're not all the
You,
same?
you are. That's exactly what fascinates me when we talk to people who are in the UFO phenomena, and they want to tell me all about the implants. And I said, and what do you suppose that might be? Well, tell me all what they are. And I said, like what? I said, you help me out here. And they, what we mean is that it's you got to have an answer for all this. I said, no, wait a minute before you start all that. I said,
Mm,
let's back up a little bit. I said, some of these objects are ceramic with a cushion on the inside and housed, in our opinion, a biological uh, camera.
yeah, yeah,
And I said, so that's just our best information on that one. I said, but there are different ones. I said, my goodness. I said, you're you're doing a lot of guesswork here, and you're not listening to the evidence. I said, some of them are metallic. I said, the National Institute for Discovery Science contacted me the next day after the surgery and said, my God, you seem to find evidence no one even knew existed.
yeah.
And you seem to find a lot of it. How do you account for that? Of course, I later realized that's a trap question. They
Yes.
wanted me to get out here and brag and do all kinds of weird stuff. And I said, well, if you want to find a donut, go find a cop. I said,
Yeah.
I'm an ex-cop. I can tell you about that. Well, they didn't think it was funny. He said, I got 3 PhDs or 4 PhDs here, and one guy's got an MD on top of that. He's got 2 PhDs. And I said, well, okay, if you want to find physical evidence of an alien, in my opinion, I said, and this is from my own personal work, I said, go find an abductee that's a Native American Indian tracker. He'll show you how to find the evidence because it's present. I said, you just don't know. You don't know what you're looking for. You don't know how to look for it. And they said, well, we want to pay for $22,000 to do a study on this really exotic stuff. 22 scientists or however many they had, there 18 or 20. They've all voted to take. We want to do your. I said, they're great. And I said, only wait. I want condition. One of them, it's got to be a blinded study. I don't want anybody knowing anything. I mean, nobody.
Mm.
Number two, I said it's got to be. Uh, I want to know every detail of that. And anyway, he came back and Bob Bigelow said, "You don't seem to be excited about all this. Why not?" I said, well, you're looking in the wrong place. He said, well, we're doing the science. I said, you're not listening to me,
Mm.
Bob. I said, I respect you and, love you like a brother and all that. However, I said, would you like it or not? And especially from a science point of view, you're not going to like this statement. I'm an alien hunter. I hunt them that hunted me and hunted my son and
Hmm.
hunted other people. I know things about them you don't have a clue about.
Hmm.
I said, my point is simply this. You need to be looking at isotopic ratios. He said, why is that? I said, well, because isotopic ratios are like a phone number.
Mm.
And he said, what will that do? And I said, well, Bob, I said, it might tell us where he's mining. Wouldn't you like to know where that's at? If there is a place he's mining, wouldn't you like to know?
Mm.
That's what you ought to be looking for. All you want to know with those scientists is the big question: is it extraterrestrial?
Yes.
Well, it is because first of all, it's a meteorite.
Well, yes.
Second of all, how to get in the human body for 40 years without anybody ever knowing it,
Mm.
wrapped in their own skin, which probably came from a scoop mark.
Yes. Actually, yes, I never thought about that. The scoop mark, of course, what they use that for. That's very interesting. So, I mean, of course, we do have meteors that come down and hit planet Earth. I mean, does that mean that, okay, it is extraterrestrial in origin, but it's terrestrial based on locations could be used. Do we find anything that we can say, okay, we're within any of these alien implants, that there are things that have been discovered that we won't find on planet Earth? Because we can find meteors on planet Earth, but we won't find on planet Earth. Is there any smoking gun evidence yet
I,
to
I
say?
don't think there, but I don't think that there is any. I've talked to some of the
Mm,
some really important people in the
yeah.
intelligence area as well, and they seem to think if there is one, and it would be of the variety of what I described last. It moves around, you can't get it, and we don't know what it is, and it will not allow you to apprehend it. And of
Yeah.
course, what I'm discussing with them is, well, you're getting into an area of implants that people haven't even thought about yet,
Mm,
and we can talk about that later if you want to. But the bottom line is, I said those are the implicit and explicit uh, uh, implants. I said they are specifically designed, one of them for not to be detected. Period. And I said I can give you your audience a kind of a good example here. A friend of mine, Bill Burns, who everybody knows, was
mhm.
supposed to be going to a cattle mutilation, and his associate, a young guy, was out there in the cold, and he had kind of nothing to do around the cow until they called him and said, "Come pick us up at the airport." And he said, "Well, uh, no, I got nothing to do. Let's pull out this metal detector," and he did, and he found this apparent metal-like object moving around inside the cow, the dead, mutilated cow.
Right.
And I laughed and laughed. And my wife said, "What's so funny?" I said, "I can't believe they never checked any of this stuff. I mean, really basic stuff." I said, "They should have checked this a long time ago." And I said, "But notice it's moving and and then they called and said, 'Come pick us up at the airport.' And he said, but," and they said, "Now." So he made the huge mistake of leaving the cow.
Mm.
When they got back,
Yeah.
guess what?
Yeah,
There's
gone.
nothing there.
Yeah.
It's already gone.
Took it. Like they do. Yeah. I know them many, many times. We find this not solely just in the UFO subject. We have this in the paranormal experiment section where data has been captured, a video, a photograph, an audible recording, incredible things, and then they're taken away. They disappear from the camera, they've disappeared of the recording device. It's like you can see it, but you can't have it. We're going to take it back. Sometimes prior to us even being able to research it properly, can't lay your hands on it because it's not there anymore. So I think this does seem to be across the board in regarding the giveth and taketh. They don't want us to be messing about with these things. But at one time, it was considered that some of these alien implants, if that's the right word, of course, um, um, had a film or maybe around them. Maybe we didn't know that they had this keratin around it, initially, because I would have thought. if there is some type of film or something around some of these implants that the body allows the body to ignore them, how advantageous would that be regarding sort of donors and stuff with medical science and things?
Well, the first thing that happened after the implant surgeries, I got contacted by an MIT scientist who made some rather wonderful statements and wanted to explore another area which we had talked very little about, and that was fluorescence. He said,
Mm.
"You need to write a scientific paper on fluorescence." I said, "There's not a scientific journal out there anywhere that would publish anything for me." He said, "Yes, there is." He said, "Because I own the journal."
Oh,
He said, I'll help you publish it." He said, I said, "Well, there isn't enough evidence yet for us to go forward with that. And perhaps
mm.
now we have." I want to touch one other thing, if I may.
Yeah, yeah,
This,
sure. Yeah,
just this was you
yeah.
asked the question, and a very good
Well,
question.
the only thing I'm asking here, really, I'm trying to understand is that if these some of these implants have the technology of a film around them that causes the body to ignore them, if we could get hold of that film, not so much the implant, but how the body is ignoring it. Do you know the medical science? What they could do with that would mean that we may have technology then to allow
Yeah,
people to have donors without rejection because we could tell it to our bodies to ignore that it's a donor, you know? I mean, surely that'd be Nobel Prize winning, wouldn't it?
you're exactly right. One of the people that contacted us was a Nobel laureate, and he said you may have a Nobel laureate find already if
Yes, I
you
thought
can
so.
replicate what you found in the lab. He said, "Do you still have the biological covering?" I said, "I have it in three different mediums." He said, "That's exactly what I'm talking about." And I said, "Well, sir," I said, "with great respect," I said, "I was born in Texas and I was born at night, but it wasn't last night.
Yeah,
What laboratory do you think I could send it to
exactly.
that they wouldn't shave off a couple of microns, keep it for themselves, and send the rest of it back to me?"
Mm,
And then they'd come up with this incredible discovery of non-inflammatory response and how we could isolate organ donors and so on. He said, "I'm telling you, you're sitting on the big one. That is the smoking gun, if there is one." And I said, "Well, I kept the original biology." Said I made a huge mistake by giving my partner at the time uh, authority to
mm,
send the implants off to be studied at a laboratory in Florida. And he had them radiated, and then he had them sawed in half. And I said I was so mad I couldn't see straight. I never told anybody about that. I just kept it quiet. That's because I didn't want a
yeah,
scandal or anything starting in the UFO community. I just left it.
mm.
But the bottom line, and you hit it right on the head, in my opinion, Steve, and that's that the best evidence we have of something like that is, in fact, the keratin material. There are
I,
other things we just didn't tell about it. We just left quiet. But
I can see how much that would be advantageous to the medical science in regarding how that could be used moving forward. And maybe we will get there eventually one day, but it's be
yes,
interesting, that the how it was first identified, it would ever be noted to it, of course. And you briefly touched on about fluorescence here, Derrel, and it'd be interesting points because I want to make reference to um, markings on the skin. Yeah, and markings in the environment, which is two different things. So if we look at the markings in the environment regarding people that have had these types of encounters, initially, we were unaware probably of a lot of things that might be in that environment because we couldn't see them, and then eventually, I think on some point, somebody decided to use some form of black light and way presto, markings started to appear. Now, not only markings in the environment, markings on the people's clothing or even on themselves.
sure.
And I know that you've come up with some information about this and you've done some work in this area. And it's not very well known. And I think it is important because people can get hold of these black lights and things. You can buy them. You can buy these certain things to look for those triggers. People don't know to look for those triggers though, of course, because it's not very well known. How did you come across that? Derrel, regarding fluorescent technologies and utilizing them?
With the interesting thing, we had a one of my abductees was quite well to do, and she was being investigated by one of our top investigators, Dale Musser. And then he called me over and said, I think you need to talk to her. He said, this is a little over my head. And I said, okay. And I said, how you doing, young lady? And I said, may I check you over with a black light on your exposed skin? And she said, what is that? And I said, it's just a normal black light, ultraviolet light. And she said, what are you looking for? I said, I have no idea. That's just based on
Yeah.
intuition. If you don't look, you won't know. I said, you get rid of things by
Good
finding out if they
thinking,
work
Derrel.
or not.
It was good
There's nothing
thinking.
wrong with that. So
Yeah.
it all started in 1992. That's when we found on her inside of her arm, she lifted up her arm, and on the inside of her arm, we found a Mandelbrot set in fluorescence. And that she, now this is important.
Mm.
She said, what the hell is that? And I said, I don't know. It's just something we're looking for. She runs to the bathroom and starts scrubbing the fluorescent Mandelbrot as hard as she could. And she reminded me of since of a police officer, of a rape victim. And what
Yes.
they do. They just scrub and scrub, and she's crying and scrubbing as hard as she can. The harder she
Yes.
scrubbed, the brighter it got, because this stuff goes deep into the skin once if it's for real, if it's a real phenomenon. Lots of things fluoresce, urine, all kinds of things, everything, lotion, all kinds of stuff. But the fact is that what we're looking for is something that is a result of the aliens' touch on you. We found four different areas of this. One is casual contact. By that I mean if the alien got you by the hand,
Yes.
really, and you physically really had what a mental thing, but a physical contact, there should be fluorescence on your hand in the form of long fingers where they grip you. Another one is that's casual contact, and it will last usually 48 hours. Procedural contact is where they use specific types of equipment, and the fluorescence probably came off of them as well, but it's in the form of some of the equipment. We have a video, literally, of a police officer who was abducted at least 2 times in a week, which is pretty rare. And you can see the old fluorescence and the new fluorescence and the equipment they used on her, because it's phenomenal.
Wow.
The third thing is some of the markings, either from unidentified body markings to the fluorescence, sometimes will be somatic patterns, like kind of like crop circles or Mandelbrot set, that sort of thing, on
Okay.
people. On
Yes.
people.
Yes. That's very interesting, because from the research we do at our end, we're referring to and finding these to be sigils in many cases, sigilization. But not just in the fluorescent, but also what seems to be subdermal markings as well,
That's right.
which is interesting. But yeah, with you just as soon as you said like crop circles, it's like a sigil. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But the amazing thing to me about I'll go one step further, and this is,
Mm.
and I mean this in the kindest way, uh, because someone asked me here a while back, said, why do you never tell people about the other parts of the things you've discovered in fluorescence and so on?
Yes.
And I said, because I don't want people picked on. I said, there are rare cases, and these are very rare.
Mm. Yeah.
Rare cases, we find a certain coloration and a certain kind of marking on people. And usually when you go back, it's a rare, you can connect the dots, so to speak. But
Yeah.
the point is that people, and even another one of my young abductees, this is amazing. When they get picked up, usually one of the first things that the alien will show you is a screen memory, which can be anything, Casper the Friendly Ghost or whatever.
I mean, it is really interesting when you talk about these particular markings. Have you come across any markings on the skin, such as dermal or subdermal markings, or they always been just within fluorescence? Because
Uh,
we're finding them at our end in regarding some of the research across the whole spectrum of phenomena.
we have, as a matter of fact, you had sent me one here a while back, and I looked at it, and I picked up a couple here, and we have literally dozens and dozens of fluorescents. Some of them, like we found a series of little tiny spots on a man's back, which he could not have done, of course,
Mm,
and right into the skin. And then 10 years later, we find someone else in another state, another city, and he's got the identical markings. You can overlay them, and they are identical. Whatever procedure or machine or equipment produced one,
mm,
produced the other. So yes, we
interesting.
do, and it's amazing stuff. And
That is.
bruisings, but the most interesting one to me is a man came to my house and he said, "Well, we're not weird like you." And I said, "Okay." He's an MD,
Oh, okay.
and I said, "Okay." And I said, "So why are you here?" Well, and he shows me this procedural mark on his inside of his arm with needle marks in a circle with a needle in the middle. And I said, "Okay. Well, we're not weird like you, though." I said, "Okay. I don't. I'm good with that. I don't care. You're not hurting my feelings."
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, "Well," I said, "let me ask you a question. What happened recently?" He said, "Well, I'm an ex-cop as well." And he said, "I got my gun out because I knew somebody was in the house, and I never did find them, but I found the same mark on my wife."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay." And he said, "And the other day I found one on my daughter, exactly like the one on my arm. What's happening to us?" I said, "Well, welcome to the weird club.
Yeah. Mm.
I'm sorry."
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it's hard for people to die, to sort of take on board, because it is so profound. But this is physical evidence at the end of the day of something that's happened. I mean, so are we suggesting on some of these occasions that even the skin at at a biological, like a microbiological level is being manipulated sometimes, that the actual biologics of the skin is somehow altered in some cases.
No question. We've had people. One young man was a runner. He said, "I run for a living. That's what I'm a professional runner." I said, "Okay. Why are we talking? Why are you at a UFO conference asking me questions about
Yeah.
stuff?" And he says he pulled his pants down to the lower part of his hip, and a professor was with me, a person that works with us, and she looked at it, and there's a 2 by 4 inch section of skin missing on the top of his hip, just went down about 3 or 4 inches. And he said, "How in the world could that happen? I don't even know how it happened, and some of my skin's missing."
Yeah.
And anyway, he didn't really want to know, but he just hoped I'd had a
Yeah.
quick
Some
answer.
those very profound things. I mean, we've discovered in regarding some of the various phenomena that's been reported and documented, which we've investigated, is hand marks on people. But what is interesting now on some of these hand marks is that a gentleman had a hand mark on his chest, and it lasted for almost 3.5 weeks, just under 3.5 weeks. It's not a pressure mark from lying on a hand because the
Mm-hmm.
hand was not normal, quite normal looking, but from the marking on the hand looked to be, interestingly enough, the top part of the hand, not the bottom of the hand, like an imprint, which seems like it's come from inside out. The mark is subdermal and come to the surface of the skin.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we end up with scratch marks in the same way. Scratch marks that are, you can feel them, but there seems to be damage from the skin underneath, as if it's come through the skin from underneath to the skin surface.
Yes,
They tend to last longer than your average scratches or bruises. Do you come across those things, sort of, Derrel, where people have had these interactions?
we do. One man sent me, of course, people send me all kinds of stuff, and uh, and in the kindest way, you have to look at them pretty critically. I said you have to understand we have a medical
Yeah,
team and myself, and as for the doctors even want to see it, they want to know what I think because they just don't want to mess with that unless I'm sure it's something substantial. One such handprint we had, which often many of these we're referring to as scratch marks in detail, are often done by the reptilian alien. And I said one of them we have here shows uh, this the grip on the individual bruised the person, but left the three finger and the scratch across the surface of the skin. The abductee later claimed he got cancer from it. Now, I don't know that to be true, but what we can say is that he didn't do whatever that is on his arm, and it is absolutely profound.
yeah,
And but the bruising, the grip alone was so powerful, and the you can tell a lot about bruising simply by the coloration. By when it starts turning brown, it's days old, a week old,
yeah,
and when it's bright red, it just occurred.
yeah.
And so the redness on the claw marks of the individual on his arm is just it's profoundly
Mm,
red. And the second best one I guess I can tell you about, just to keep it brief, is Dr. Karla Turner and I were having a conversation with a contactee at a conference, and she was saying, "Oh, you people are so stupid. You think all these aliens are bad." And I said, "I don't think anybody believes that." And she says, "Well, you just don't get it." And of course, Karla Turner, she's not as nice as I am when it comes to people
no, yeah,
getting in her face. She may be small, but she'd be tough.
yeah,
And anyway, she said, "Elton, get over here." That's her husband, and she says, "You want to know what the alien looks like when they handle you?" And she had him raised up the back of his shirt, and I've got a picture of it here on my screen.
yeah,
And you can see just the tear marks down his back where the reptile tore him to pieces. And she said, "Now you want to explain that and how that
yeah.
is going to help the planet and so on." Anyway, it's just
No, no. I mean, I have to
he's
take my,
tough.
it really is, and I have to take my hat off to the late Dr. Karla Turner, because she was a pioneer, I believe, in this subject matter, which is really people have avoided talking about. And sometimes I think it's really is the elephant in the room. I think it really, this is, people want physical evidence, but they're not actually looking at the people that are involved. They're looking elsewhere for physical evidence. And I'm thinking to myself, but it's right there. And sometimes people have not talked about it because of what it might signify, what it might indicate. That sometimes these incidents are taking place and you're handled like a piece of meat, it seems, which
It's true.
is, and I get that because I've lectured, and I know you have, and I've lectured in places in the US where the Bible Belt areas. This stuff does not go down well.
Fact number one, we do not know with any certainty exactly what these entities may be. Extraterrestrial, interdimensional, terrestrial in origin, some combination of all of the above, something we have yet to even dream of. I'm going to use the term alien merely for convenience, and I am not implying that I believe they are from another planet. Now, certainly they may well be. We just don't know, and that's a fact. The aliens themselves have identified a number of different origins to various abductees and contactees throughout the years. But of course, we humans have absolutely no way to check out any of the statements that they've made. Therefore, we cannot know these things, as the dictionary says about facts, to be certain, to be objectively verifiable. Fact number two, and I'm stating this with all of the tact and diplomacy and self-control that I can, and those of you who know me know I have very little. At least some of the aliens are liars. The aliens have given a number of stories to people throughout the years about who they are, where they're from. And we have a list, if you compile this, and at one point I think I tried to, a list of planet origins for these beings that include everything from the planet Lanacane to Banlon. They also have given us a variety of explanations as to why they're here and why they perform certain procedures. Often, however, these explanations are contradictory. Fact number 3. In encounters, the human's perceptions are controlled, as are the human's conscious memories.
It's driven through belief rather than the evidence, and the evidence supports that. Yes, there are some people which might have some nice experiences, but let us not brush away under the carpet those that are not having good experiences. You have to put it all out on the table and say, look, it constitutes for all this. The phenomena, I say, look, it's the same hand that feeds as the same hand that bites. You know, it's some, you don't know what type of experience you have. You might see a craft in the sky. You might have some type of close encounter experience. You do not know what you're lining yourself up for. I always say to people now, you know, if you're interested in the subject, there is a matter of some cautions you should be aware of, because you certainly don't want to invite this type of stuff. And it's not something that you want to take home to meet your parents, you know, at the end of the day. But I'd like to, you know, take my hat off of Dr. Karla Turner, because she was talking about some of the things that people didn't want to talk about. And these are some of the most profound, and it affected her and her family personally as well, didn't it, for quite some time.
Yeah, she she came, I had her come several times to the Houston UFO Network, which I own. And she did some presentations there. And one of these days offline, I'll tell you a story that was quite profound, where she was in the middle of our support group, which she was leading for the women. One of our abductees apparently died. And anyway, it was just,
yeah,
it's another story. But another way to look at this from that I find fascinating. One of my abductees, a friend of mine, called me and said, "I want to meet you in Roswell if I can." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Well, I want to meet you at Roswell. I want you to talk with me and everything." I said, "Fine." And he said, "I'm going to bring my jeans with me that have got fluorescence all over them from the alien contact." And he sent me drawings, beautiful drawings of this things that he encountered. Anyway, what was the whole point of this discussion for me is when he got there, he looked over a lot of our stuff at our table. And I said, "We'll go around and look at everybody else and check everything out and see what you think. And let me know what you find." And he said, "Okay." He went over to this one table that had 3 little pieces of probably the Roswell craft.
Oh, yeah, yes.
That's probably.
Okay. All right, yeah.
But you can pick them up. It doesn't mean anything.
Mm.
When he picked him up, I mean to tell you, he had a reaction that was he got.
This is the experience. This is the experience that picked them up.
And he dropped it on the table, and he called me over, and and I started filming it. And anyway, he said, "I don't understand what's happening." And I said, "Well, let me see if I can throw a little light on this thing." I said, "Number one," I said, "there is a concept that any data that touches any data, any object that ever touched any object, any part of the universe, is instantaneously knows that information wherever it came from." I said, "If that's true, and I think it is," I said, "you just touched something that touched you."
Yes.
And I said, "You have to understand, I don't care what people think about these craft." I said, "Some of these craft are hooked up directly to the physiology of the entity." And he touched that, and you touched it, and now you're getting the same information he is. Now, I said, he's a low IQ individual. He has an IQ of no higher than 80 if it's a small alien, 135 if he's a bigger one. I said, but my whole point to you is he was made that way. And I said, you're experiencing some of the information from him that's there. And it scared the boy half to death. I
Yeah.
said, nothing to be worried about. It's not against you or anything. It's just you're picking up. You're That's just remarkable that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. That's incredible because I've also heard that absolutely that is an association between materials and individuals which are geared to be able to be in contact with them, in a sense of speaking. I've also heard the opposing that some items which have been found, small parts and things, when placed into the wrong hands, have turned to dust. Literally, that it's not
Yes.
for them. So it's like it's geared, it's connected somehow genetically, do not know, but somehow connected with the experiences or with certain people, but not others. There's a difference between, people in regarding the experiences that they have and the things they come into physical contact with. So I've heard both sides that things have
Yes.
just literally turned to dust. It wasn't for them to touch, or it has some type of activation, some type of connection consciously with some of these materials, which I've come across, which is fascinating. And when we talk about, because these are, you could class these all sorts of different things. People have scratches, marks, scoop marks from them, bruising, fluorescent marking. People have been injured, but people have to often ask me, and I have said this openly on my channel. I said, ask me, what's the extent of injuries? And I've said the very worst and even worse than that to the demise of individuals in regarding certain various forms of phenomena which have been associated to the UFOs and these beings. I've been in talks recently with Thiago Tichetti from Brazil, who's running AJ's UFO magazine,
Sure.
and great guy. And I had this conversation with him, and including other researchers from Brazil. Brazil seems to be probably the worst place to encounter this type of phenomena. Really
Yes, I
does.
agree.
And
I
I
agree.
know you know this, but the stuff that they're telling me, even more in even recent times, it's still going on. People are being found in a mutilated state. People are being found without the skin. People are being found, and they believe, and it's not fully investigated because it's wrapped around in this belief system that yes, it is some type of UFO phenomena. It's been going on since what they are listing is 1994, 95, 96, and onwards since then, where people have not only been attacked for no apparent reason, in some cases, just traveling down the road and bang, or they're found in the most strangest situations, and they cannot identify how these actions have happened because it's just looking like you'd find a cattle on the plains of Colorado in the
Sure.
1970s. You know,
Sure.
that is very concerning because the first thing is that there are many people out there that want to convince themselves that the phenomenon of these animal attacks that have been going on in association to UFOs is been down to humans doing it with special technologies and that sort of thing. But the research that we have, Derrel, I've been talking to a doctor and he's from India and he's telling me about his grandparents and the stories have passed through that they lived on a farm in India and they had to rush out to send all the family out to get all the livestock in when they saw the lights coming down from the mountain. This
Yes.
phenomenon is not new. This predates the technologies for us to be able to do this. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a spate of horses in the same way found in France, 20 odd horses. They didn't know what to put out the press on this. So they said, oh, well, it must have been some type of cult. Well, that's the going thing because that's what else can they say? But things are still escalating and still happening in regions around Brazil, and they have no explanation for it, and it's still happening. Now, if we're dealing with a faction of the phenomena, how are we supposed to identify it between one object in the sky and another? We can't. it's a toss of the coin, isn't it, really? You know, if it's going to happen to you or not happen to you. But there seemingly are these incidents which some people do not want on the tabletop. They want it underneath, under the carpet, don't want to be known. But I have to sort of say, look, you know, if you're going to look at the subject in a whole, as a whole, you've got
Yes.
to put everything out, all of it out, and then make your own mind up. Should you really want to invoke them? Do you really want to go out there and consciously connect with the phenomena? How do we know what the safe protocols are?
I, I agree with you totally. As an ex-cop, of course, I'm faced with this a lot of times at conferences, and people say, "Well, you know, we don't like your view." I said, "I don't have a view. It's not a view. It's
Data.
evidence.
It's data
You
evidence.
just got to look at everything. You can't look at part of it." And I said, look, as an ex-cop, I said, I'm not interested in good aliens.
Yeah.
If I see a murder, I'm not looking for all kinds of good people out there to go prosecute.
Yeah.
I want to know who did it.
Hmm.
I said, and the same thing is true here. I don't, if there are great aliens helping us, God bless America and all of that. You know, I hope we they fix the ozone hole and do all kinds of stuff for us. Until then, I'll be looking for these guys that are doing this horrible stuff. And I said, that's just the way it is. I said, if your child gets abducted by a bad guy in the middle of the night, you call me. You don't ask me to go check the neighbors because they're nice people. You
Yeah.
want me to go out and look for the criminal. And I said, that. There's no difference here. I said, because you're looking at the same type situation.
Yeah.
And animals are the big one that showed up first, as far as a lot of people are concerned. These mutilations, we've got cases of mutilations of 10 animals inside cages
Yes.
where with locks on them. Nobody got in and did that. That was a case in Brazil.
Incredible.
One of the best examples I love to give people, because they always come up and say, it's the CIA doing all this. They're doing all
Well,
that.
you might know, yeah.
You just don't get it. And I said, they are involved in some of this stuff
Yeah.
because they're watching it very carefully. I said, but what you don't understand, and I pulled this 8x10 picture out of, I said, these are some pictures that were taken by a friend of mine who's studies this very carefully. And it shows a pictograph on rock over 1,000 years old of a UFO, the alien, and him taking sheep and putting them inside the UFO. I said, how clear do you want it to get? I mean, you want a photograph 1,000 years ago? That's close I'm going to get for you.
That's as good as.
I don't know how to help you. And
Yeah.
but then there are human involved in this too. And we have one case where the guy and his father. This is a several-year-old case that I got. And anyway, they're in a boat. The fishermen, they're in a boat and fishing, and all of a sudden the light comes from underneath the dark water, lights the whole boat up, scares father half to death. Son thinks, "Wow, that's really cool." Teenager, of course, and scared the father half to death. Long story short, the father. Whatever was underneath the water left the wake inside of a ship when it left.
Really?
And scared him half to death. They ran the boat up on the ground, and he went and got his uncle. They drugged the boat after they took the motor off out in the middle of the water, pulled out a 9mm pistol and shot holes in it and sank it. Because the boat was aluminum, but it was magnetized.
Oh, was it?
Now they're scared. So he said, I can't figure out what's going on. I said, that's a great story. And we can go get a magnetometer. We have all we need to find it.
Yeah.
I said, my question is, what happened after that? He said, my father's personality changed. He said, you have to understand, he was the life of the party. Everybody loved him in town. He said, after that, he said, everybody hated him. He said, I hated him. In fact, he said, at age 16, I left home. I couldn't stand him. Anyway, that's just one illustration. Then we got two little children that died as a result of their abductions, and I've got the autopsy reports of them.
Yeah. There are some terrible things.
Horrible stuff.
They are.
Horrible.
And these things, though, I mean, you have to treat them as a suspicious crime incident. but they are left unknown. I've heard of accelerated rigor mortis in association to these types of events. So yes, I can completely understand that. So these terrible things are still happening. They're not just something from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, still being reported. I have people and friends, associates in Brazil, which are telling me that these things are still happening. So I started to pry into why Brazil? What's different about Brazil? And they said, well, Steve, they think it's down to the culture. Is that there's so many various different cultures in Brazil, but there's a lot of rituals taking
Yes.
place in association to an NHI seemingly can be evoked through consciousness, through your behavior, through a ritualistic practices. They've got altars, they're doing strange things. He said, Steve, it's down to that. It's tarnished Brazil in a sense of speaking. We're getting this type of phenomenon because people are literally don't know that they're asking for it. Have you heard about like the Brazilians, this type of stuff, ritualistic practices and things? Seems to be quite common actually in certain
Yes.
places.
Yes. I was in Brasilia, the capital, and was doing a presentation, and it's the first time I'd met Dr.
Yeah.
Hangs out a lot with Bud
Okay.
Hopkins.
Yeah.
And anyway, he waited in line for about 20 minutes to get to meet me. And he said, I saw your presentation, and um, I'm ashamed to say, Derrel, that I'm not familiar with your work. He said, I had no idea there was that kind of evidence available. And I've been studying this stuff for 40 years.
Mm.
And I said, well, I hope it's useful for you and that you can use some of it. And but anyway, after the conference, all the guys come up and said, "You want to go out and party with us?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm married and I'm not going to be interested in that." And he said, "Well, there's 17,000 religions out here, and you can see anything you want to see or imagine. It's out here." And I said, "I can just imagine from Santeria to
Mm.
other things." I said, "I don't want to be a part of that." And
No.
they went out and got into it, and that's what they do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you take the risk when you do it.
Well, I do say this to people. I say, look, this phenomenon does have a sting in its tail, you know, and if you upset it, it can be retaliate. But sometimes it doesn't need to retaliate. Sometimes it's just, well, you know what? You've invoked this, you brought this on, and this is what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem with some of this type of doing these and even experiments into this area, NHI, they seem to know they could be right round us at any given time, and we'd be completely unaware of them, Derrel, really. I mean, if we're talking about parallel universe or parallel realities or even interdimensional phenomena, they could be aware right round us at any time, monitoring and watching what's going on and choose to interact with who they want to, when they want to, in any way they want to. And we have to sort of manage that. Ritualistic practices, though, have been going on in association to these entities and these UFO associated phenomena for a very, very long time. Early Germany, long before the Vril Society came on, and they claimed they were talking to Aldebarans and gaining information about technology. We also finding paperwork and records that Douglas, Boeing, Bell, all these aviational companies were also dabbling in, you know, um, trying to go to seances, trying to communicate with intelligences beyond our realm and reality to give them little bits of technology so they could go and manufacture it. The same thing with Jack Parsons being involved, communications with things that might give him information about building rockets. I want to thank you again for coming on, Del, and I hope you and Doris have a great Christmas, and a good New Year. And it's been good to catch up, my friend.
Guess give my best to the crew, and
I will do.
you got a wonderful crew there in the UK. I just admire you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Del. You take care, and I will talk to you soon.